This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so you guys had a full day today, and I got good news and bad news. The bad news, let's start with that. You want the bad news first?
Yes.
Bad news is that you're scheduled for the next 2 hours with me. That's the good news. It usually doesn't take me 2 hours. It really depends on y'all if you have questions for me as I go through this to see where we're at, to make sure that we're covering everything. But the only way I know if I'm covering it right is if you ask questions. So, you guys, the looks on your faces in here, and for people out there to say something to me as well. So anyway, we've got a lot of things to go over. We're going to go over the statutes and the board's functions, those kind of things, what the board's all about. Briefly talk about rulemaking. I know someone has already talked about that with you a little bit in another class. I'm looking at what I call recent trends. They haven't changed a lot. Unfortunately, people haven't learned a lot of the lessons that are in this. And I'm going to make you familiar with NAB and our relationship between the board and NAB and more about what that is. Does anybody know the difference between a statute and a rule? I heard someone actually cover this in a previous class. But they didn't call it rules. I think they call them procedures and policies.
Policy versus procedure.
Yeah, but statutes and rules, anybody want to take a stab at it? Anybody back home want to take a stab at it? Okay. I'll tell you what the difference is. One is broad and one is more specific. And basically, they are both law. That's a big thing that you need to understand. Both are law. It's just how they're made that's different. The legislature writes a statute, and usually you're going to see that a statute says something like Nursing Home Care Act. It's an act of Congress. A statute is. It's an act. The other things are usually administrative rules, like they call them. Ours is the Oklahoma Administrative Code. You'll see OAC in front of those there. That's their rule. But they are law because they're approved by the legislature, even though the legislature writes the statutes, and then in that statute, they authorize someone like a board, like ours or the health department, to write rules that are more specific. And you get to go on from there. They are enforceable. They do have the same effect. The statute does take precedence. So if we write a rule that is in conflict with the statute, which we should not do, the statute would take precedence over that. And that's where we get our authority from to do that. It's supposed to be easier to amend a rule. It's not. I mean, we have to, when we decide we're going to change a rule, we have to call a public meeting and air it out. We let everybody make a comment about it for 30 days prior to that meeting. Then we have to get it in front of the legislature. Then the governor signs it. All the same process as a statute, but with extra stuff that we have to do. So just so you know. They are binding and they do have the same effect as law. Our board changed in 2011. We have 15 board members. 8 of those are administrators. Of the 4 of them are representative of the general public. That gives you a total of 12. And 2 of those 4 that are general public have to be medical professionals. I believe we have 3 medical professionals in those 4 right now. We have a nurse, a pharmacist, and a doctor that sit on our board. So we're over and above those requirements. So you've got 8 administrators, 4 general public. That makes up your 12 that are confirmed by the Senate and they're appointed by the governor and they're confirmed by the Senate. The last 3 members of our board come from the Commissioner of Health, Director of Human Services, and the last one is Mental Health Substance Abuse Services. We've got 3 other agencies that have a representative on our board. In no case does the actual commissioner or director sitting here, they've actually applied, sent someone as their representative. But that's where all 15 of our board members come from. And again, those 12 are appointed by the governor and confirmed with the advice and consent of the Senate, like you're seeing at the federal level with the Supreme Court right now, sort of thing. Okay, not nearly as contentious when they appoint someone to this board as that is. But anyway, you get the idea. Our rules is Oklahoma Administrative Code 490. It covers chapters 1, 10, and 15. I don't know why it's not 1, 2, and 3. I've never understood that. I will never understand it. They were changed in 2011 to include residential care assisted living, and adult daycare. We've had our most recent changes in 2018, and we're constantly looking at things in the rules to make sure that we're keeping up with what's going on. Looking at what's going on right now, the board is looking at all this lack of ability they have to make a lot of decisions in emergencies. We've never had real emergencies before, but we don't have a lot of authority to waive or anything. We can't waive this or that. We don't have it. So I also looked through the rules recently as a requirement for the governor sent a requirement to analyze our rules, and we discovered that a lot of the restrictions in the rules aren't on you, they're on the board.
Wow.
The board cannot do this, the board cannot do that. So it's kind of interesting when you actually analyze the rules and look at where that stuff's coming from. These are the 3 chapters. Chapter 1 goes through the administrative operations. It's how we do things, basically. Chapter 10 is where you're going to find most of what you're interested in. Things like qualifications to be an administrator. You're going to find the code of ethics in there, fees, schedule of fees that are in there. All that's involved. We can't just go willy-nilly change our fees if we want to. And we haven't in years because it's so hard to get the legislature to approve a change like that. So, and chapter 15 is where you would find certified assistant administrators. And that's the only thing that's in that chapter. And there's actually some certified assistant CAA stuff in other parts of the book, but chapter 15 is dedicated to it. So you need to, if you're ever working with a certified assistant, you need to crack that baby open. All right. All right. So that's where I just paused for a minute. You guys have had a chance to read that. That's the little book that I gave you on a day 1 with the little black spine on it. Anybody have a chance to read that and come up with any questions that come to mind already? I mean, we're in what, week 11
yeah.
of your training? You've been 2/3 of the way through?
Yeah.
Have you come up with questions? You got questions?
I don't have questions. I just, there was some interesting things in there. Lots of interesting things.
Yeah. Okay. Nobody has any questions? Most people don't.
Obviously, most of the other issues that came up along the way or what?
The reason we have a rule,
Yeah.
you got a lot of times that's, we'll make a rule because we realize that, well, we don't know how to address that. So we make a rule about it. You'll see in there prescribed penalties for like a CEU violation.
Right.
That's because when we had people violating it, we had to bring it up, and every time we had to revisit it and say, what's the penalty for that? So they said, well, we're always sticking with this same thing. Why don't we put it in the rule? And then we don't have to ask about it. That's what it is. Unless the person wants to argue about it, and then that opens the door, and then the board could actually give them a stiffer fine. So
They have 30 days to pay it.
Yeah. You can do a lot of things. So anything didn't make any sense to you when you read that? That's my last question up there. I'm going to go through now and just talk about some of the top tags that the health department has highlighted last year. I stole this from a report that DEH had. It says top 10 tags. The number 10 tag was about pharmacy F755. I'm going to say more about how the tags are important to you. Those 3 tags, 755, 657, and 580, actually tied with 53 citations in 2019. So you've got some issues there. You got 10, 9, and 8, right? Those are important tags to pay attention to because that's what they write up. Is that something that the administrator gets in trouble for? Not necessarily, but it could be. We'll talk to you about that. 689 says free of accident, hazard, and supervision, cited 64 times. There are definitely a possibility of some administrator issues among that. 758, unnecessary psychotropic medications, that is cited 67 times. that's more of a nursing issue, but you should be aware of those requirements and issues, and you can have some influence on making sure that that doesn't go the way that they write it. Activities of daily living care provided for dependent residents cited 69 times. Again, that's a care provider issue, really, most of the time. And then 725, I found this one. It's tucked away in their report. It actually means that it was cited 71 times. It made the top 10, but it wasn't on their list. It was in their report, but it wasn't on the list. And I found it in there. So the list is actually top 11, not top 10. And I made that there. So sufficient nursing staff. Probably heard a lot about that already. There is some issues for the administrator to deal with that. Quality of care, go ahead.
Federal requirements, state requirements, different staff issues.
Not really.
Part of they both line up, right?
They're lining up pretty well, I think, and I think the you've got these numbers, the ratios that you have as a minimum. You got to remember that's a minimum, because ultimately, if they come into your facility and they say you don't have enough staff because of the acuity level, because you're not taking good enough care of these people, they can write you up for it, because that's the ultimate little sentence above it that says you have to provide enough to take care of people, regardless of the staffing ratios. And that's a fight that administrators have with owners all the time. So they're saying, you've got the minimum. That's enough. But you've got an acuity level that's driving your people crazy trying to keep up with them. And so you need more. Trying to convince someone who has the bucks to pay for that's your challenge. All right. Food procurement is for quality care. So the first one there's 74 times, and food procurement, storage, all that kind of stuff, 77. And development of more comprehensive care plan at 81 times. That's definitely probably a nursing issue. Infection prevention and control, 85 times. That was last year. That's the number one. That's the number one issue, and it was last year. That's the only kind of surveys we're doing this year, right? Yeah. So it'll probably be number one again.
Probably more
because that's what they're looking for this year, and rightly so. But it's interesting to me that was the problem last year.
It's a broad term.
Yeah, it is a very broad term, but that's what they find most of the time. So you guys think you're going to get in trouble for that a lot? You might. It depends on how it works. We've heard this from other people in here too. Oklahoma ranks bottom in a lot of things, and we're addressing a lot of this stuff. The governor's focused on this with the PFP and all that kind of stuff to address that. And I think we are coming up. We're putting attention on it, but it's just sad that Oklahoma is at the bottom of so many things, and we shouldn't be. I mean, there's no reason for it. Where do you think this board ranks among other boards like ours in the United States? We're top 5. We're top 5, probably top 3. So we are doing things right. I'm not sure why that doesn't translate to these other issues. Maybe it will. Maybe it is just taking time, because it does take time for a trickle down. We'll do trickle down economics. It'll take a while for it to the leadership that you're providing to take a hold. Most of our reports do come from the health department every year, except this year. This year, we're not getting very many reports because they're focused on that one type of survey, and everybody actually is doing pretty well. But those F tags that you get, those don't always mean that you're reported to the board. How it happens is, ever since August 1st of 2014, when we start this process with a notification. They used to, the health department, if they had a substandard quality of care tag, any substandard quality of care tag, they referred the administrator to this board for possible disciplinary action. That's the words they used. It was a referral. We didn't have any choice but to open a case. We had to tell the administrator, you've been referred to this board by the health department for this survey. Well, as of August 1st, 2014, we convinced them that that's not what the federal reg says. It actually says you are supposed to notify this board of those survey results. And we determine whether we think that's an administrator's mistake, error, omission, whatever. If we think it should be attributed to the administrators, then we would open a case. If we don't, we don't. So it's a lot better that we're not putting these administrators through that ringer of having a disciplinary case on their plate all the time on top of everything else they're doing. So we've taken that away in 2014. So it's not necessarily a referral. The notification comes to us and we decide whether we want to make it a referral or not. And even if we make it a referral, doesn't mean that the administrator is going to be found guilty of anything. It means we want to know more. At least get his explanation of it that we can't read in the survey or whatever. Okay. But everything else that comes to us is a report. And we do have to handle those the same way. So a citizen comes in and complains to us about something that's going on in that facility, we open it. It's a case, and they have to respond to it. DHS sends out a long-term care investigator from APS, we open the case. No question about it. But these notifications from the surveys, they're left up to our decision now. Just like if I was to read something in the paper that said there's crap going on at your facility, and I said, well, that sounds like the administrator's screwing up big time, and I'll open the case based on reading it in the paper or hearing it on the news. I can do that also. If no one else has reported. But citizens can go online and report too, and we get a lot of disgruntled employees that start something for you. So you have that to look forward to. But we can usually read through those pretty well and help you out. So anyway, I think I went through that already. Notifications are not automatically referrals. We do look at them. And we treat them as information obtained, just like watching the news. I think I said that already. I'm ahead of myself. How do they become referrals is when we look at that substandard quality care and we ask ourselves a series of sort of questions. If we can attribute it to the administrator, it should be a referral. There is a big clue in those survey results. If we find the tag F835, which is the administration tag, there's usually something in it that points it to the administrator's fault. Or it's telling us this is the Board of Governors, or there's an administration issue with the DON. It can be written up any of those ways. So we're going to look to see if that's there as well and see if they said anything. That's a big clue. We can do it without it, but that's a big clue if the health department is telling us that tag also, because they should be opening that tag. I've written all the things that are in the guidance for the health department to open that tag. And it says there in the bottom line, I put it in red, surveyors must document how the administration knew or should have known of the deficient practice and taken actions as appropriate. There's my clue. If they're following it properly, I can see that this is what the administrator did or didn't do that he should have or shouldn't have done. And it'll be in black and white. They should lay it out for us. So, complaint. You hear about complaints all the time. That's when that citizen or that disgruntled employee goes online and writes a report to us. You call that a complaint because they complained about you, but we don't call it a complaint. It's a report. It only becomes a complaint when we say it's a complaint. And we've analyzed it. We've analyzed the report. We've analyzed the administrator's response. We put them together and said, yeah, they screwed up. And it's a complaint. And then we write the complaint formally. Our attorney writes it, says, this is what we think you did. And we go from there. Okay, that's kind of the short and long of all that is. It only becomes a complaint when that probable cause committee, there's a committee of board members that actually look at it first. A small number, there's 3 people that look at it. They make the determination that this is real or not. They dismiss a lot of stuff. But then they look at it and say, this is real. And then it goes to the attorney and she says, she writes the thing up, and we'll go through that whole process as well. So I think this was a good change that we had these notifications interjected, so we don't have all these. We have about 100 cases a year. And I still count them as cases, even the notifications, I still count them to keep up. But the actual referral numbers is a lot lower, and we don't run the administrator through that process of having to explain it if we don't have to. But most of our stuff does come from the health department, and I think it's a big relief to a lot of administrators over the last 6 years that we've been doing it this way. What that committee is looking for when they look at it, they're looking before, during, and after an incident, see what the administrator did or didn't do that he should have done. You know, before something the administrator caused, something he did or didn't do, something he should have been prevented by the administrator. You know, you should have a policy about that. Well, you didn't have a policy. Show me your policy. I don't have one. Okay, good enough. You failed. Okay. During an incident, most of the time, the administrator's not on the scene. I mean, a lot of this stuff happens at 2 in the morning. You're not there, so we're not going to look at much most of the time. But if you were, you know, involved in it, then we're going to look at it. And that's mostly going to be an allegation of abuse by you or misappropriation or something like that, where you're actually involved. But most of this other tags that are substandard quality care, something going on in the facility, you may not even be around, but you're responsible for it. You may not be culpable for it. And I think I've explained the difference between that. And I think over the years, I've tried to educate the board about the difference between responsible and culpable. I think we've got a pretty good grasp of what that difference means and where we're at. But we do not do this strict liability. You should have had a handout in your stuff discussing strict liability. It was a one-page thing from ACHCA that the ACHCA does not support strict liability, and I think that we were there before they were. We didn't think that just because you're ultimately responsible, we should spank you for everything that goes on. No, that's not the way it works. That's not the way it should work. So the other thing is after the incident, we look to see that you did all the things you were supposed to do after the incident occurred. Did you do the investigation? Did you report it? We heard a lot about incident reports this morning. Some of those questions I was throwing in from my desk that he was reading. You guys didn't see it. The other guys at home probably saw those were for me, but some of those were for me because I wasn't sure he was covering it right, because allegations is where it's at. If you have an allegation of abuse or misappropriation or something like that, you better report it. You know, you've got to report it. Because that's the most popular violation that we have. If someone failed to report an allegation, they say, well, we did an investigation and we didn't find that the allegation was substantiated, so we didn't report it. You're required to report the allegation. That's why you have to do that. Okay? Any questions on that? Right? Jump up and down and say allegations, allegations, allegations. Report the allegations. And then I threw in the question about criminal activity, because that's another hot topic with the health department. If you suspect some sort of criminal activity, you're required to report that immediately. What does immediately mean? They've defined that as 2 hours, within 2 hours. This is where I take some exception to the health department and the surveyor's interpretation of that law. It is a law, and they're interpreting it very strictly. It says 2 hours to report immediately. Well, every incident of an immediate report that I can find in anything, the immediate report requirement is to you, the administrator, first of all, or someone in the facility is required to report to you, and the requirement for you is to come in and fix that problem. That's what it says. The requirement to report to law enforcement is so they can come in and do something and stop whatever is going on, that sort of thing. what is the health department going to do at Friday night and midnight? They're not going to even see that report until Monday when they come check the fax machine. There's no requirement for them to do anything immediately. So the 24-hour requirement to me for the health department piece makes sense, but I'm overruled because they're interpreting it that it's immediately. So you report it. If you're reporting it to law enforcement, you report it to health department, same time. Just keep that in mind. You got a question?
Grievance versus reportable. Like, when do you personally step up from a grievance to a reportable? Immediate harm or any kind of harm?
Grievance? I mean, like an employee
Like
grievance?
writing a grievance out instead of because it's not, no harm.
I think it would depend on how it's written. I mean, you're going to have to interpret that. Are they alleging some sort of abuse, or are they just feeling like they don't like the way we do things? You know, what kind of grievance are we talking about?
Resident grievance.
But like what?
I'm trying to think of an example right now, but like, say they think that the maintenance guy broke their TV. I mean,
Well,
is that a grievance?
he's probably abused them, and that would be misappropriation too. He's taking something of theirs because he was abusive. Did he drop it by accident? You know, it may be that he's not guilty of it, but if they're saying that he did it on purpose,
What's the purpose thing?
yeah, you gotta read the allegation. Are they making an allegation that he did this on purpose? So how they feel about it? Are they saying that he did this to me on purpose, or was it an accident? They're telling you it was an accident. It was an accident, unless you find out something different. But yeah, that's an allegation, and if they're saying that they did this to me on purpose. But if they say this was an accident, and I think that the facility should replace my TV in your example, well, that's going to be up to the owners to whether they're going to cough up money to replace a TV that they broke, or the maintenance man if he feels strongly about it. But I think that would, if they're telling you they know it's an accident, then it's an accident. Probably wouldn't hurt, in my opinion, to report it just in case. If you're in a gray area where you don't know if it's an allegation or not, it's an allegation. Cover your rear. Yeah, that's what I do. Because someone's going to say, well, that was an allegation. They may change their story later and make it a little stronger. So, I don't know if we got any questions. Looks like we got some flash note there. So, anyway, difference between a culpable and accountable. I think I kind of touched on that just a little bit. Culpable basically means that you're punishable for it, but accountable means you're going to have to explain it. Whether you have to take the lashings for it or not, that's another question. But the administrator is responsible for everything that goes on in the facility, accountable. But whether he's culpable or not is a question that the board determines a lot of times. But we don't force strict liability on the way we look at our cases, and they do look at them case by case basis, and they try to get a good feel for what's really going on there. It's hard sometimes because you read the complaint or the report, and you read the administrative response, and they're 180 degrees out. So that's why if it's a gray area, it's probably an allegation. Here's the process, how it works. I'm going to kind of lay it out in a diagram, flow chart sort of thing, so you can understand how it works. We get these notifications or reports or referrals to us. We notify the administrator if we determine that it's a notification. If it's a notification, we determine whether it's a referral or not right up front there. If it becomes a referral report, we notify the administrator, we have it, and we ask him basically to tell us his side of the story. I'll talk about that in a second. But what's going on there, I'm summarizing the report, and I collect the response from the administrator. That's initiating the investigation, but we have to do that within a certain period of time to start that. We have to finish it within a year. I think we have to start it within 90 days of receipt. That's what the law says. So then I summarize the report, and I collect the administrator's response, and I give that response and the report to the probable cause committee, which is about 3 people from the board. And by the way, after they've reviewed it, when it goes to the board, if it ever goes to the board for anything, even to be dismissed by their recommendation, they recuse from that further discussion. Those 2 or 3 people. So they're not involved past this phase. But that first letter, we basically tell them, you know, we've got this from a 2567 most of the time. This year, most of our stuff is coming from online reports from citizens. We've got like 2 referrals from the health department this year, 2 notifications, because they're just not doing the surveys that they were doing. It's basically dried up from what we're normally seeing. It's kind of nice that I don't have that pile of cases on my desk that I normally do. We let them know what their options are. If they're appealing that survey findings through the IDR process or something like that, we ask them to let us know, because we're not going to move on our case if that's still, if that survey could be changed. We're going to wait to find out how that comes out. Occasionally, someone wins an IDR and their substandard quality care tag that they were reported to us for is downgraded to a non-substandard quality care tag, and we dismiss it at that point. We actually administratively close it. But the case is still there, and it shows that it went through the IDR process and it was changed. We just dismiss it at that point. So that's what we're letting them all know about that. Now this slide is the determination of probable cause. PCC means probable cause committee. And they're either going to make a probable cause this recommendation or a probable cause doesn't exist recommendation. They make the no, this slide is just showing the one side of it, no recommendation. They say there's no probable cause, we take it straight to the board at the next board meeting, and the board votes on it, and with that recommendation that it be just that the case be dismissed. The board normally votes on it and approves that, and the case is closed, and we notify the administrator to follow down on the far right. If the board votes on it and they don't approve that, which is very, very, very rare that the board would not approve it, what happens if the board votes on it and they don't approve it? They usually say, don't disapprove it, they table it, say, we want to know more about it. And I have to go back and give it back to get some more information from the administrator or the reporter and get that back, and we come back, follow the board's direction, go back in the process and pick up where we were and come back and bring it back to the board, or it goes back with a probable cause finding that something was unburied. How that happens is usually someone that was on that committee might have said something to someone about their review, because there's 3 people review it, 2 or more of them say, if one of them disagreed with the other 2 about it, then we'll highlight why he thought it was different, and that's when the board would start discussing it. So if they all 3 agree, it's usually smooth sailing that's dismissed. But if one of them disagreed, then it might go this way. But I think in 11 years, I've seen 2 cases be sent back. But that's the process that it goes through. It's rare, but it does happen. So anyway, that's the process for no probable cause. What happens with it? When they make the recommendation that probable cause exists, then it automatically, the formal complaint is drafted by our attorney. And the attorney and I are talking about possible settlements for that, and we serve them with a proposed agreement. At the same time, we serve them with the complaint. So this is what we think the board would accept as a proposal to agree with that. And if the administrator agrees with that, he signs it, and we move it on to the board. If they don't agree to it, then we're going to go to a formal hearing to let the board hear the whole case. But it's a lot easier to come up with an agreement. So we go through they sign it, we take it to the board votes on it. If they approve it, then we review it, and it's closed. If they don't agree for it, then it goes back to some point in the process to pick up and probably comes back for a hearing. Or another different. It's come back, and one time it came back with a different agreed order. And I've seen the board actually look at those agreed orders and they said, well, I like it, but you're too hard. You fine them too much. And their board will reduce the fine in the board meeting without that person's permission. And we've never had anybody that had the fine lowered complain about it. But they have lowered the fine in the board meeting from what was on the agreed order. Okay. And the board is limited, by the way, to $1,000 per violation. And it comes out of your pocket, not the facility's money. It's yours most of the time. And if you're lucky, the facility's paying for that for you. But yeah, that's the limit. And you know, it's pretty interesting to watch how this all plays out. $1,000 is pretty low, and we don't start at 1,000 most of the time. If you're getting $1,000 fine, you did something probably fairly egregious, and maybe it's your second or third violation of that time as you've worked up to it. And we've got some of those that do things, and they've been before the board 2 or 3 times. So. But we do work out that letter, and we explain all that to the person when they get the letter with that proposed order, and we give it to them, and they either accept it or they don't. And most of the time they'll accept it or they'll negotiate something with me and the attorney. If they have an attorney, it's the attorneys that are talking. I just get out of it. I don't mess with it. If they don't have an attorney, I'm usually talking to the administrator, and our attorney stays out of it. But if they have an attorney, then it's attorney to attorney, and you're paying for it. So I want you to get your money's worth. It's you get your attorney to get in on that. If we have the hearing, you've got the complaint, we've served you with a date for that hearing, we hold the hearing. If we uphold the allegations, we issue an order, whatever that is. We don't know what the board will find. They may decide that they want a big fine. They may want to revoke your license. They can do anything at that board meeting to do whatever they feel like it is. If you appeal it, then it goes through an appeal process. It can be dismissed, that order and the final order issued. But if they don't uphold the allegations right at the hearing, then it's dismissed. Just that simple. So that's the process that there is. We do issue the orders and send those on to the National Practitioner Database, Databank, whatever it is, NPDB, used to be HIPDIB. We file that, and it also shows on our website. If there your cases that you get to come to my desk, no one sees them. It's you and me. You can see it in your own record, but the public can't see it until the board takes some sort of action that says you were guilty of it and finds you, or there's certain actions they have to do that makes it viewable to the public. A fine, a reprimand usually is the sort of thing that makes it publicly viewable. And then we collect the fines and send you the reprimand letters and all that kind of stuff that needs to happen. You have to do your CEUs, and we account for those in the amount of time that you're allotted in the agreement for those things, and the case is archived, and that's all there is to it. Anybody got questions about the process? Oh, look, my questions over here. I think there are. Only 17. This is them talking to each other. If someone's agreeing with me, they got a deficiency because the staff said they weren't getting showers, so they said you don't have enough staff, so all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of catch up. Yeah. All right. There's a big discussion there. All right. Recent trends. This goes back to 2011 that I looked at, and like I said, 2020 is really unusual. I don't know why it wouldn't be. I don't know why it wouldn't be. So, most people do call all this stuff complaints. We don't. We know what it is. It's a report, referral, notification, or a complaint. We know where we are in our lingo in our office. Screw that up. Clicking the wrong thing, didn't I? All right. This shows you over the years the source of our reports, referrals, and all that stuff back to 2011. You can see that the average number of total is 93.71 through last year. Most of that comes from the health department, more than 2 out of 3, almost all the time. VHS varies quite a bit. The private complaints have been up lately, and this next year is going to be up even more. When I say board initiated issue, those are mostly things like our continuing education audits. When we find someone that's short, we open a case. So they're short. But it can be someone showed us something in the newspaper. Did you see this? I don't read every newspaper, no. So if someone brings it to me, usually I don't go out looking for it. They usually bring it to me, but most of those are continuing education. I'd say more than 9 out of 10 of those are continuing education that the board initiated those complaints with those. Okay, you can see that by a drawing, and you can see that the health department is the big guy over that, and the trends follow what the health department does quite a bit. If you're into pictures and you're kind of that kind of geeky guy, that's why I put that up here. So, all right, probable cause in 2011, we only found probable cause in 18 of those 91 cases. That's been pretty consistent over the years, about just under 1 in 5 or 20%. Now that we're doing the notification screening, we're just doing that earlier. And a lot of those cases, we're taking them out earlier. We're still coming up with about the same number of probable cause cases every year. We're just not putting you guys through the screws to believe while we get there. Because that's a pain in the butt to write a report to rebut everything that was in a survey. I mean, you've already done it once when you wrote your plan of correction. And I would prefer that you work on writing the plan of correction than answering me. Unless I have a question of you, then I would say. Now, the other 12 cases we had that year came from 27 reports. They had probable cause, but a lot of that was, again, from the CEU course, the CEU issue that we have when we do audits. That year was not particularly a great year, but I'm going to tell you, there is no excuse for not doing your CEUs. There really isn't. And I do think 2011 was odd. We had only 1 in 2012, and it gets better. But we had 5 in 2015, so you never know. It's random. We do randomly pick those people. I think some of them don't think that there's random. We had someone complain to me that I was what's the word, profiling. I was profiling them. And I'm like, I have nothing to do with the random generation. It comes from the computer that told us who to pick. I'm not profiling anybody, but just because you got picked last year doesn't mean you got this year off. You can get caught 2 years in a row. Otherwise, it's not random. That means if you think you were audited this year, that gives you next year off. No, it's not going to work. You can still be audited, and that's happened, and that's what they were complaining about. You audited me 2 years in a row. Well, I didn't really pay attention that I did. Sure. All right. I do think referrals are stressful. That's why I'm saying we don't want to do that to everybody. When we find that over 80% are not an actual problem, why would we want to put those people through that stress? But I would tell you that the best way to avoid that stress is to make sure that you don't have substandard quality care tags on your survey. It's a pound of cure is what I'm saying. It's better for you to go out there and fix those things before the health department finds them for you. Just run a good home, and then you don't have to worry about it. Don't try to figure it out how to fix it after the fact. Now, the tags that were referred, there weren't just 91 tags. There were a bunch of people had a lot of tags. There were a lot more than 91 tags involved in those 91 referrals we had. Some of those homes had, 5 to 8 tags that we were looking at. There's actually 145 tags in that year that were referred to us that we looked at were substandard quality care tags, and that comes out to about 1.5 average of those that we looked at. You want to know what you're getting looked at? It's basically if it can be a substandard quality care tag, and those are actually defined in the federal regs, which ones they are. Those are the ones that can get you referred to us. You need to have a clue which ones those are, and then make sure that you address all of those issues and you're taking care of all the right things. The trends do change over time about what people are writing up. Like right now, everybody's looking at the COVID type surveys. I mean, that's the only thing we're going to see right now is infection control. That's what's the big deal. If you're not doing the infection control right, then you're probably going to get in trouble. So, but over the years, they pick on something because this is the topic that we're the last in the nation in right now. So let's come up to 40. Whatever it is, they'll pick on something, and you'll find out that everybody's getting the same hammering at their facilities over the same issue because everybody does it the same way a lot of times, and it's an easy thing for the surveyors to come in. They know that you're going to do it that way. That's what everybody else is doing. Your sister facilities are doing it the same way, and you guys need to be talking to each other. You need to be talking to other facilities. You need to have a networking among yourselves to know, well, you just had a survey over there. How did it go? What's the big thing right now? So you guys kind of hit your bets a little bit just by talking about that and making sure you're keeping up with what's driving the focus right now. That's why your membership in some of these associations will help you keep up with some of that kind of stuff as well. It's not always easy to tell just by looking at a survey. If I get a survey that's like 500 pages thick, I'm probably going to be a little alarmed by it. And if I get one that's only maybe 10 or 12 pages, I can tell you that there's not something wrong with the administrator in that. It could be. You really have to read it to find out what's wrong with it. The number of tags or the number of pages doesn't tell you anything. The kind of tags and what you did is what's really the issue. That's where we find that the administrator failed or should have done something he didn't do. But they are specific. They are found in the federal regs. And this other one, F835, again, that's a big clue. Because they are supposed to tell us what you did or didn't do, or what you should have known about. You can't just say, well, I didn't know. They can say you should have known. And then you're still culpable for it at that point. That's the sort of thing that happens. But those substandard quality care tags are the most important ones to an administrator to focus on to make sure that those things are not happening. Again, I'm going to say that's a foot stomp moment. This is not for a test. This is just for life. I mean, for an administrator, this is where you get through it, is making sure that you're doing all the things before, during, and after any kind of incident to make sure that you're doing all the right things, especially if they're related to any of those substandard quality care tags. Okay? If you've done all those things, then you're not going to be culpable. But you are still going to have to explain it. Kind of sucks, but that's the way it is. Okay. Violations, those come out in our rules. This is what we were talking about, is our rules, right? It all comes back to our rules. The board may sanction the licensee. Those are all listed in chapter 10, paragraph 10.53B 1 through 27. I've listed some of the most common ones. They are numbers 5 and 6, 7, 9, 10, and 13. 13 is not related to survey, but let's look at those again. This is what that paragraph says. It says the board may take action against any licensed administrator or an unlicensed person acting as an administrator. Well, we have that occasion. And may deny an initial application. Say if you're not licensed, we can deny the application because you did some of these things wrong. Deny a renewal application, suspend, or even an AIP training permit. In 11 years, I've suspended, revoked 2 training permits. Happens, believe me or not. We can warn you, censure you, reprimand you, impose fines or probation, or other remedies not that are less than suspension or revocation upon evidence of the following. And then there's at least 27 things. You guys read those 27 things? Got a good feel for those? Okay. Starting with number 5, which is the ones that you find in the survey results. Gross negligence or negligence that constitutes a danger to the health, welfare, or safety of the residents or the public. The key there I would put in italics is a danger to the health, welfare, or safety. That's the issue. And that's where we get into, you didn't do something you should have done. That's negligence, right? And that's, again, where you say you didn't know about something. Well, if you should have known about it and you didn't do something, then you probably spent too much time on the golf course and not enough time in your office. Or too much time in your office and not enough time out on the floor walking around. Okay? One or the other of those things probably happened to cause you to have that one. Number 6, this is the most common violation that we see. It's not because of that first part, physical or verbal abuse of a resident or misappropriation. It's because of the next part, failure to report an allegation of physical abuse, verbal abuse, misappropriation. And that is required by law to report allegations. I said that enough today. Did these other guys before me say it enough? I'm trying to make sure that you guys get that because it still is the biggest violation, most common violation we see. All right. I don't know how to ring that bell for you. Make sure you understand. Fraudulent, deceptive, or dishonest conduct in the management of a long-term care facility. We don't see this very often, but there is this little phrase here in the judgment of the board, and such conduct is detrimental to the best interest of the long-term care profession and the public. So they think you're doing something that makes administrators look bad. Then they can throw this at you. But the only time we've actually used number 7, we actually saw a rash of it last year. We had, and it might have been the surveyors were looking for something, I don't know, but there was something going on because it had to do with fire drills. Fire drills. People were having surveys, and the surveyor would ask them for their fire drill log or whatever, show them when did you do your fire drills, and they didn't have one, so they went back to the back room and made one and handed it to them, and had people in the building signing it as they walked around in front of the surveyors, believe it or not, said, here, sign this so we can give it to the surveyors that we can do these fire drills on these dates. That happened twice last year. We got those reports of fraudulent conduct. You guys are laughing, but it happens. Now here's the bad part. What would have happened to them if they had just sucked it up and took the hit on the tag? Not a substandard quality care tag. Then nothing would have happened. That's a K tag. That's a life safety code tag. They would have probably got a little fine for the facility, but the administrator got reported to us for fraudulent paperwork that they were doing, and the surveyor walked around and said, hey, didn't you just sign this a few minutes ago? This ink was wet. Yeah, I signed it. People are going to throw the administrator under the bus for stuff like that. There's no reason to do it. If you don't have the paperwork, I don't have the paperwork. Admit it. That's not a big deal. Yeah, be honest. So anyway, that's the only time I've seen that is recently. Now this one, failure to comply with state or federal requirements applicable to the facility. Any F tag, any K tag, any tag is a failure to comply. So is that what it means? It's not. But Because if that is what that meant, every administrator would be in trouble every time they had a survey. That is not what that means. And I've had a hard time explaining that to my board, especially new board members that come on and they say, well, that's a tag. He didn't wash the wheelchairs. Something, any kind of tag you can think of, those wheelchairs were dirty. Something. That is not what we're talking about. These are big items that they're talking about. This is like, you didn't report that you're bankrupt. I don't know how this needs to be changed, but this is a rule that needs to be changed to capture what they mean. But that is not what they mean. They do not mean that you got a tag on something. Too many people want to read that into it, and there is no way that we're going to penalize every administrator, every survey they have, just because they didn't get a zero efficiency survey. So I'm on your side on this, all right? But we do see it every once in a while, but some big things people miss. Number 10 is the failure to comply with the rules and requirements of the board. If there's something in our rules that you didn't comply with, including the code of ethics, that's where this one is covered. And there's a lot of things in there that are kind of gotchas if you didn't do it. I've seen a couple of times, I think the Medicaid fraud people told you about it maybe. People that are administrators should never be the power of attorney for someone in their home. They should never do that. And we've actually spelled that out in the rules, and we see it every once in a while. That's a code of ethics violation. All right. Some of that kind of stuff that happens. 13 is the CEU issues I was talking about. If we do an audit, we do an audit every year of at least 5% of all administrator types. 5% of nursing homes, 5% of adult daycare, 5% of assisted living, 5% of red care. If you're short, then this is the violation, number 13. It says failure to provide verification of continuing education hours. We're not saying you didn't do them. We're saying you didn't prove to us that you did them. So it's a failure to show us that you did them. It's not a failure to do them. Maybe you did them. We've actually had some people say, well, I did them. Here's my certificate, but it wasn't approved by the proper people, or the course they attended had expired by that approval. So you got to watch that kind of stuff when you're doing your CEUs. Make sure that the course is approved and remains approved for the whole time that you're doing it. Don't get caught in that. Those are stupid ones. I hate them because I know they thought they did them. But occasionally that happens. We had an old former board member that got it. So it's easy to do. So make sure that the NAB approval is current. Make sure that the board did approve it. It wasn't approved by the Kansas board, Oklahoma board, or NAB. That's what you got to have. Okay. The offenses we've actually put in the rule. It's $50 for every one that you're short, and you're also assessed an additional 2 CEUs, and you have to pay attorney fees. So if you didn't do any, or you weren't able to prove that you did any, and you missed 24 because that's your requirement, what's the fine? $1,200. $1,200 is what it comes out to. Plus, you have to do 48 more CEUs, plus your 24 for that year. So that year, you're going to do 72 CEUs in 1 year, and you're going to pay our attorney fees. And those CEUs are not inexpensive either. Unless you get on one of those programs where you can buy their whole library for the year. Seen that? It'd be smart if you got caught in that situation to do that sort of thing. But anyway, the second offense, all that doubles. It's a $100 fine per, and each one of those, if you're short, is a violation. That's why we can go well over $1,200, up to $1,200, like we just said. It's not a $1,000 fine. That's a $50 fine times 24 violations. See how it works? All right. Third offense, you got to come before the board. That's what they determine. They want to talk to you if you're that stupid. You've done it. I've never seen anybody do it twice. I mean, that's a pretty healthy penalty the first time, but don't do it.
Do you have like an area for these resources on our state website?
We have, on our website, we put the things that this board approved. And you can go to the NAB website and see what NAB has approved. NABweb.org.
Give you a call
Yeah, or Pam. Pam's really good at telling you this.
you probably know.
No, she can tell you that's, the company that's holding the training should be able to tell you if they're NAB approved or not. You know, if they're telling you they are. Here's the other thing is, nowadays, if you're going to a NAB approved course, you have to provide your NAB ID number. You're going to get one after you get your license. And you provide that, and they upload that into the system. If they're not asking you for a NAB ID number, that's a red flag that that's not a NAB approved course. So something you might keep in the back of your head. You'll get a number. It'll be an R with 7 digits behind it. You'll never have to remember it. You'll never have to memorize it because it'll be printed on your annual card with your license. When you renew your license, it'll be printed on there with your license number. So you can always pull that out and say, here it is. I don't memorize it. And it's one time. We are working with NAB to get that number assigned to you earlier. We want that number assigned when you apply for the test the first time, so that you get that number before you get a license number, so we can track you. We've had people come, we had a guy take the test in Oklahoma, failed, went to Missouri, got approval to take it in Missouri. We didn't know in Oklahoma that he did that. And then he failed it there and he went to Illinois and got approval to take it in Illinois. And NAB had tested this guy 18 times before he passed. And nobody knew that he was going to those different states to do it because they weren't tracking him that way. They came to us when he asked for us to approve it. You know, he's requested it 4 times with you. You know, well, they'll notice that, but they don't notice it when it's from different states.
I think after the second or third time you took the unit.
Well, we fixed that. That's something that happened. That happened in probably early 2003. So we've learned, and we've got the computers talking to each other and all that kind of stuff. We fixed a lot of that kind of stuff. Someone said, does that rule come from something that happened? Well, some of that stuff does come from that kind of experience where someone's gaming the system. But back then, now you guys have 2 years to get your license after you finish this class, right? And it doesn't matter how many times you take the test. We don't care. Fill as many times as NAB will let you. Because NAB has a ceiling on the number of times you can take it because they only have so many forms of the test that they offer. So you can only take it as many times as they have that test available until they replenish the test the next year. Then you can take those tests again. And then when you're out of test, you can't test again. That's the way they do it. When we say you've got 2 years to get your license, we used to say you could fail it up to 5 times. And if you had failed it more than 5 times, you had to get permission from the board to take it again. We said, well, we've never turned anybody down, so let's just put a time limit on it. And then you start over the class. And that's why that's another rule change. It made sense. Why are we bothering to bring that person in front of the board, embarrass them, and tell them the whole world that he failed the test 5 times? We don't need to do that to people. We don't want to do that. Okay. All right. This is your chance to ask questions about those violations. I went through just a few of them. There are 27 of them. You can see some of them are more geared toward something that keep you from getting a license. But there are also things that you can lose a license for. I know you talked about this morning, you were talking about things that you do that could, barrier offenses that keep you from working. Well, they should be the same barrier offenses that keep you from getting a license. And a lot of that is the way it's designed, but we have to know about it too. So we do background checks and all that. What was your question?
I was gonna say, well, what about the mental one? That's such a hot topic nowadays.
Mental?
Mm-hmm.
Read it.
Mental institution or judicial determination of incompetence.
Oh, it's going to be pretty rare.
Yeah.
They would have to, we'd have to have some document that told us that that person had been declared mentally incompetent. I mean, it's not my judgment that you're an idiot. And some judge said that, you know, and we would have a document that said that, not me. You see what I'm saying? And so if we do a background check on people, and if we come up with something like that, then we're probably going to ask them. And my experience when I find stuff, weird stuff like that, and we do find stuff every once in a while on somebody, I usually bring them in and talk to them about it. And again, I don't want to embarrass them in front of the board and the world. So if I could show them what it says in the rule here, says that the board can do this, and they're probably not going to be comfortable giving you a license when I tell them, and they can't not tell them. So I, talk them into withdrawing their application. That's what I would try to do. But, maybe they're not listening because they're declared mentally incompetent. So I don't know. That's not one that I've ever had any experience with, to be honest with you. But that's what I would do if I had something like that. Is I would try to convince them that this is not for them. And this is not for everyone. I hope you guys realize that. We have a class of 34. We have that's common. We have a class of 30 or more, and almost in every class, someone along the way says, "This ain't for me," and they drop out. I think you guys are at 33. You had 34. You had someone realize that it's not for them, and they've withdrawn. And it wasn't because of something like that. I'm just saying they were doing the AIT or something. They said, "No, this is not what I'm signed up for. This is not what I wanted," and that's good. I mean, I'd rather you learn early than take the job on and be overwhelmed and have someone hurt from it. And that's better that we go through this and find out and weed out some of those people along the way. So, all right, any other questions? I see your head over there. Well, my fingers open. Maybe that's all. One said that they've met people that said it ain't for them. I believe they're out there. So, all right. Let me see. I did that again, didn't I? I'll learn one of these days. Check that. Yeah, put my cursor over on the other side. So I talked about the board's role and how we sanction people and all that kind of stuff. How does the NAB fit into this? Who is NAB? I keep talking about NAB. Of course, they do the NAB, the exams that you do. But who are they? We worked with PSI, that says it up there. What else does NAB do? They do the CE registry, they approve CEs. They've got a pretty big role, but who are they? You might know who they are? Okay. The National Association of Long-Term Care Administrative Boards. We are just a member board of that association. It's not the National Administrators Board. As NAB sounds like that would be the right thing for it, but it's much longer than that. So there is no such national board, and they have no jurisdiction. They are just an association of boards like us, where we work with other people like us to achieve these things. We've got really, the people that approve those CE programs are experts from around the country. They put these programs in front of them and they say, yeah, that's good. And they'll, there's a little committee that approves those things. It's not just someone in Oklahoma saying it's good, but Oklahoma understands the process and says, we're buying into that. That's a good approval process that they go through, and we're allowing that. So that's what it is. We are an member of that association of boards. It's a nonprofit organization that has run by a board of governors, which is one person from each board set at the board meetings twice a year and vote on things like that. We have elected officers that are the executive committee for the NAB, and I am currently the treasurer of NAB, by the way. Did you know that? I'm gonna let them. So anyway, they were scraping the bottom of the bowl. We have a bunch of committees that do different things. We've got an item writing committee for the tests, for the tests, plural. One for the NAB, NHA, one for the core, one for the residential care assisted living, one for home community-based service. So there's basically 4 item writing committees. A committee that does the continuing education. We've got an education committee that approves and accredits colleges around the nation to teach healthcare administration. If you have a NAB accredited degree in Oklahoma, you could skip my class. No one's done it yet, but you can in Oklahoma get your license. It's in our rules that you can. Northeastern State University is actually in the process of getting accredited right now. Probably within a year or so they will be accredited. So we'll have one in Oklahoma. I've been working on that for a long time to get someone accredited. Northeastern is just about there. We actually have a student that we are waiving right now to go through the accreditation process. She's in the AIT. We've assigned her one of our approved preceptors so that she that way the NAB can go out and do the site visit, look at how they're training her and everything else, and part of the accreditation process. So AIT is part of that. Hers is 1,000 hours. NAB requires 1,000 hours on that as part of that accreditation. So it's over and above what we require, and I think that it's smart for us in Oklahoma to allow that and to encourage that, because we would probably end up with a lot younger administrators, a lot better prepared professional administrators, I think, that have spent 4 years studying it instead of 18 weeks. Nothing against you guys. I mean, I think I'm doing the best I can. In fact, our pass rate is on par with those accredited colleges. So we're doing really, really well, I think, especially when we're a lot older than they are. Gee, well, we don't test as well. The management of NAB is run by a company called Bostrom, and that company is a management company that runs nonprofit associations, and they take care of all the financial document. You know, all of us have day jobs. I'm the treasurer, but I'm just reviewing the stuff that this company is doing. They give me the stuff, I review it and sign off on it, that kind of stuff. But the management company is a big company that takes care of that. They're a great resource for us as a state board, and they do meet twice a year. Actually, I meet with NAB probably 4 to 6 times a year. And the voice, it seems like I have NAB emails almost every day of something that I'm dealing with because of my involvement. I've been pretty involved even with the AIT workbook, which I'm redoing right now, by the way, and everything else I'm doing. So we've got all that going on, and they've got a strategic plan, and ours mirrors that. We do contract with NAB to administer the exams for us for both the NHA and RCAL, and they are an option for people to take the state exam in Oklahoma. That was a statute change. It was lobbied for by one of the associations in Oklahoma, and said that we want an option to take that. So, well, we had to give our exams to PSI through NAB to administer them just the way they said administer the NAB exam. You can take it. And we've had people take it in other states. I guess that's why they want it. It's cheaper to pay for a more expensive test than to come pay us and fly here and spend the night in a hotel, all that kind of stuff. So if you're coming from another state, maybe it is a good plan. We don't actually see a lot of people taking the test through PSI unless they're really in a hurry for the test to get their license. Someone with an endorsement license, someone from another state has already passed the NAB, and they've got enough experience to get our license without coming through the class and all that kind of stuff. They would go take the NAB wherever they are, and then they could come get their license and come work in Oklahoma. And that makes sense for that person too. So I didn't argue about the fact that they want to change the law, but I just had to do the work to put the exam into PSI in the format that they needed it to make it work. They are a great resource. They do this thing called the professional practice analysis every year. I think they're actually changed the name of it this year when they're doing it. Went backwards, I think. Professional practice analysis sounds nice, right? PPA. Well, they went back and they're calling it the job analysis report, the JAR. But I think the professional practice is better. But someone determined that it's a jar this year. So anyway, they determine how much time an administrator spends in each of those domains of practice, and how critical those tasks are, and how often they do them, and that sort of thing. And that's how they determine what should be on the test, and how much of that should be on the test. Also, that percentage of things that you get on the test comes from that. They do that every 5 or 7 years. They establish the domains of practice, and all the tests through that they validate that it's not changed that much actually. Since I've been here, we've done. I think I got here right when one had been done, and now we're starting. We did another one in the middle, and I watched it, and it didn't really change much. There was like 1 or 2% of changes in that one, and then the one that's coming up is really it's going to look like a big change to y'all, but it's not. I've already looked at it. Again, they're just rejumbled everything around, and it's still going to be the same as it ever was. There's going to be 4 domains of practice instead of 5. They've combined a couple of things into one. Where you had finance and HR, there's 2. Now they've got 1 domain. They call it operations. And so that's going to be the big change that you see there. The other thing that I've noticed that they're doing is when you go, if you get to take the test on the new one, which may be 2 years from now, you guys probably will be on the current system, but it's going to be a while before this whole thing bubbles and happens. But the new test, the core, is going to have leadership and management stuff on it. There won't be any leadership and management on the line of service, 0, because that's all the same. There is no difference from one line of service to another when you talk about how you deal with leadership, strategy issues, that sort of thing. So it's evolving, but it should make it easier and better for everybody, I think. So these are the current weights. And you see that human resources and finance were kind of the small ones there. And customer care and support is the big one. And those are getting combined, and the numbers are changing a little bit, but the same things are still being done. They're just moved in different pockets. So if you know this stuff, you know this stuff. You know, it doesn't matter if you're studying in this current system or the next one, you're still going to do fine. I worried about that last time too. I walked through it, saw it. I was, satisfied that it was the same as it ever was, and I think it's going to be the same again as I go through this process of rewriting the AIT manual. So we are expanding to include other long-term care. They've done this thing called the HSE. I heard of that, Health Services Executive. That's a credential that NAB does. They actually, if you take all 3 lines of service tests and the core test, you can get this thing, but you have to have a little experience in the field before you can qualify to go take that. Unless you're going through a
2 years, right?
What's that?
It's after 2 years.
I think it's 2 years. I don't remember. But yeah, you can go get this HSE qualification. And then if you're going to move from one state to another, then basically you've just proven that you've got a broader understanding of everything by passing all those tests. But it's still entry level. You still don't have a deep understanding. You've got a broader understanding of more things. But what that works for you is this way. There's some people who end up working in 3 or 4 states, and if they go to another state, they have to go to all 3 of those 4 states or 3 or 4 of those states that they have a license in or had a license in, and get an endorsement from that state before they can get a license in a state. If you have the HSE, it's one-stop shopping. NAB answers all those questions for them in one spot. And they don't have to send their transcript in either, because NAB says, we've got their transcript. We know that that's part of the qualification, just to prove to NAB that you've got a degree and all these kind of things. And if you have a NAB accredited degree, then you're automatically eligible to sit for all those exams and get that HSE right out the chute if you want to. Or you can just take the core and the NHA and get the NHA license if that's what you want. But we've got the breakdowns on those tests. We've been doing this since July of 2017 with this new test, and it's working really well. And the CE registry's been in place since 2018. So we've been relatively busy at NAB, and this board is pretty active, staying involved with that as well. That pretty much sums up our relationship with NAB. I'm able to answer any questions you have about NAB or about this board or about our rules. Nobody at home wants any questions? Anybody awake?
I got a question. When, so we take our state test after we finish this course, correct? And then we
Yes.
take NAB?
Then you finish your AIT, then you take the NAB.
Okay. And that will be offered when? The
The
NIT?
NAB?
No, the state.
The state exam will be the last day of class.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Week 18. But the state exam is there, and then you finish your AIT, and then you can take the NAB exam. You should take both of those at the same time, the first time. And if you pass them both, great. If you pass one of them, then you just about pass the one you failed. But we do recommend you take both of them together the first time. You have 3 hours total. You got 2 hours for the core and 1 hour for the under service. That may change. Go ahead.
You're breaking up, Z, I'm sorry.
You want to do the, have you seen the TikToks where people, they show.
We got multiple people talking is why I'm breaking up. Barely hear someone.
Your last 20 seconds that you were talking was really vague. We couldn't hear you.
Can you mute yours so I can talk? But I don't know what the question is. I've answered, I think I've answered the question. You know, the NAB, you get, there's 2 parts of it. You've got 2 hours for one part and 1 hour for the other. You cannot, you know, when you finish the first part of it, you don't get to take that time into the second part. It's another test with a different, its own time. So in the old way, you had 3 hours. This way, you've got 2 hours for one part and 1 hour for the other part. And you don't get to add them together. Okay. That's the only catcher that is there on that. Did you hear that?
Yes.
That's what I said the first time, but. All right, are there any other questions? Otherwise, I'm pretty much done for the day. Here's someone on the microphone though, I just can't.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. I should get my preceptor hours done in December. Is there like a waiting list or a time frame after I complete the preceptor hours to be able to take that test?
The NAB test,
Yes.
okay, when you finish the AIT, you can't be a preceptor for 2 years at least, but when you finish the AIT, you can let you know how to sign up for the NAB exam. And that's its own process. You have to go into the website and sign up for it. And then they send her an email that says, hey, Joe Blow is asking to take the test. Is he eligible? And you say, and then Pam says, yes, they are. Then they send you another email. You go back into the system and you pick your time, place, and date for the test. It's not offered on a certain date. It's available at that facility or at that testing facility when they've got a 2 or 3 hour seat for you available. That's the way they look for it. And if you can take it on that date at that facility. You pick where you're going to take it and when you're going to take it. And you set that up for yourself. But you can't do it. You have to go in and ask to take it, and then Pam approves it. Then you go back and pick your date and time. So it can take a couple of days to pick your date and time. And you don't really do that until after you finish the AIT, and Pam's got all the paperwork on that. And she's
Okay.
happy.
All right. Thank you.
Got to make Pam happy, right? Mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Right? All right. Any other questions? You guys are about 2/3 of the way done. You feel like it? Good. All right. Well, I don't have anything else. And I just, if you come up with something, if you see something in the rules that doesn't make sense to you, talk about it. You guys are going through the health department rules and statutes as you do the practice exams and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully you guys are talking to each other on some of that, working your way through that. Make sure you got the right answers for those things. Because it's an answer doesn't mean it's the right answer. Verify it. Look at the source. Go back and read it for what the source actually says on that stuff. And when I do my review the week before the state exam, I will go into all that in depth, and we'll talk about the differences that you see. Because there are differences from res care to nursing homes to adult daycare. They are different. And those are the things you ought to be focusing on if you see a difference. Those are things I'm going to ask you about. Because on your test, those are going to be the things that end up on your test, because the board wants to know that you understand the difference. If you're licensed to do all of them, you need to know which one does what. So if there's a difference, they might key off on it. And as you're preparing yourself to study for the test, watch for words like may versus shall. There's a big difference between you may do something and you shall do something. One's a requirement and one is permission. It's an option. It's may. Okay. So watch for that kind of stuff, because if you see those words in the rules, in the statutes, the board sees those rules or sees those words, and those are great words on multiple choice questions. Other thing that's great things on multiple choice questions as you're preparing to study for this is numbers. Because I can ask you, how many feet do you have to have your gasoline for your lawnmower away from the facility? And I can give you a multiple choice question. Is it 25, 50, 75, 30? What is the right answer? How many feet does it have to be? And that's a great multiple choice question. You either know it or you don't, right? But when there are numbers, those are things you should be paying attention to for testing. I know a lot of you are nervous about testing because you haven't tested since you got your degree in 20 years ago, whatever. So testing is a thing, but I'm just reminding you about test taking 101. That's, if you're writing the test, what would you focus on? And that, I'm telling you, just human nature. The board is lazy, and they're human laziness that they're going to write the test to where they can actually, easily write the options that they're going to give you. They're going to put a lot of thought in. This test is a lot easier than the NAB test, because the NAB test gives you 4 answers that are possible. They sound plausible, but you really have to know what the answer is when you're taking the NAB test. Be prepared for that. This stuff is right out of our regs. I think it's pretty simple. But don't not prepare for our tests. Because you still have to know that stuff, and those are gotchas, the shalls and the mays and those kinds of things, because those are different answers on the answers. You know the difference. All right, well, good luck to you all, and I'll see you all next week. I think Bob Lane is with you next week. We'll get you guys started with that next section, and we'll move you on toward the test.
Thank you.
Thank you. So